During the Cold War, while Americans and Soviets were keeping their eyes on the skies, under the sea, hundreds of nuclear-armed submarines from both sides were keeping their eyes on each other, cruising almost invisibly off each other's coasts. They played a sometimes deadly game of cat and mouse, each side shadowing the other, ready to destroy the other at the first provocation. It was spying on the grandest and most secret scale. But now, for the first time, those secrets are beginning to emerge. For 10 years, John Craven was the chief scientist of the U.S. Navy, a civilian whose knowledge of underwater engineering earned him enormous power and a virtual blank check from the Pentagon. He was the godfather of a submarine called the USS Halibut.
It was probably the most classified thing I've worked on in my life.
We're talking about a spy ship here, correct?
We're talking about a spy ship.
Totally.
Totally. We're talking about a spy ship totally.
The official version told to Congress was that the ship was a deep-sea rescue vehicle. In fact, Craven was creating something out of Jules Verne. Halibut could go deeper than any sub. Its camera-equipped robots could prowl the ocean floor. The cost of the ship went 2,000% over the budget given to Congress. Craven says many cost overruns are not the boondoggles they've been made out to be.
Those of us who've been in the intelligence business know that the $200 wrench is not a waste of the taxpayers' money. It wasn't paid for the wrench. It was paid for something else.
What it really was a cover story for one of the great spy operations of the Cold War.
Sherry Sontag and Christopher Drew broke the secrets of the underwater Cold War in a new book called Blind Man's Bluff. They say that in the operations of Halibut, not even the crew knew what the ship was up to.
They would tell these men when they signed them up for these special projects that they were going on to research vessels, and it took a while before they learned it was really James Bond, not Jacques Cousteau.
And in 1968, when Halibut was dispatched on its first assignment, a search, even the crew had no idea where it was going.
The navigator knew that he had to mess up the navigation so that the crew thought they were someplace else in the world than they were. The people who were doing the search were not told what they were searching for.
The mission, the hunt for K-129, a Soviet nuclear-armed submarine that had vanished in the Pacific. The Soviet leadership had no idea where the K-129 submarine was, and they were panicky. She was carrying code machines and nuclear missiles, a potential intelligence bonanza for the Americans.
This would be the most terrifying thing I can think of for a leader of any nation, is to worry about their ballistic missile submarine. Where is it, and why is it gone?
Not even senior Soviet officers were told the sub was missing. At the time, Admiral Lev Chernovin had command of 40 subs in the Northern Fleet.
I can't even explain why it was concealed from us. In the case of the K-129, the Northern Fleet was kept in the dark.
To this day, no official Russian explanation for the disappearance has been given. But one rumor persists.
The sinking of the K-129 was caused by a collision with the U.S. submarine Swordfish.
Shortly after it had lost contact with the K-129, Soviet intelligence had tracked the American spy sub USS Swordfish, extensively damaged, pulling into a military shipyard in Japan. Swordfish's logs confirm a stopover in Japan, but the U.S. Navy denies there was any encounter with a K-129. The American commander of Swordfish says absolutely there was no collision, that he hit an iceberg. You don't believe him?
As far as I know, there are no icebergs in the area. Maybe he tried to find some to hit.
While the Soviets were still in the dark about K-129, Halibut found it, lying 3 miles down on the ocean floor. To this day, the U.S. Navy will not discuss the mission. But
Halibut's cameras ended up taking 22,000 pictures of this submarine, including one incredible shot of a skeleton of a Soviet sailor lying on the seabed near the boat, wearing a sheepskin foul-weather jacket and black boots.
Irina Zurovina was married to the K-129's chief engineer. Iraida Kobzar's husband was the captain.
I still don't believe that he's gone. Do you understand? Every time I see a sailor in a Navy uniform, I run ahead of him to see if this is my Volodya.
The families of the crew were told nothing.
For 30 years, nobody would bother to think that they had died heroically in the line of duty. At the time, we received an idiotic document. It does not say they were killed, but rather that they were found perished.
As far as the Russians were concerned, the case was closed on sub K-129. But for the CIA, 22,000 pictures were not enough. It wanted the sub lock, stock, and missiles and spent 6 years and $500 million secretly trying to raise it with a ship called the Glomar Explorer. It was mostly a failure. In 1975, the New York Times got wind of it, and so did the world.
I was working in customs at the airport. I checked all the foreign newspapers and magazines brought in by passengers. That's how I learned.
Among the few things the Glomar did raise were the remains of 6 Soviet sailors. On board the ship, CIA technicians held a makeshift burial at sea for the men.
Viktor Lokov, Vladimir Kosciuszko,
They taped it. It was kept secret until 1992, when the tape was presented to Russian President Boris Yeltsin by then CIA Director Robert Gates.
My message to him was that even at the height of the Cold War, in the darkest days, we had treated these Soviet sailors with respect and with dignity.
Gates says the underwater intelligence wars made for some of the most harrowing espionage missions of the Cold War.
Both Presidents Carter and Reagan were, I think, in awe of the courage as well as the skill of these people who carried out these missions. And some of their experiences were sort of out of Tom Clancy novels.
Even more thrilling, more dangerous than the hunt for Red October was Halibut's next mission, to find and place recording devices on Soviet naval communications cables deep under the Arctic ice. For 2 decades, Halibut and other subs sent divers down to pick up the tapes and replace them. If caught, the subs had orders to self-destruct.
The men knew that if they were close to being caught, that they would disappear, and nobody would ever tell their families where they'd been, what they had been doing, or how they had died.
A kind of American kamikaze in a certain way, if the situation is bad enough.
It could have been. How would the Soviets have reacted if they had caught one of the submarines in the act of tapping into their cable? You were right inside their minds. I mean, this was their private communications to each other.
I believe that the information from this source and from other intelligence sources, in fact, played a very important role in keeping the Cold War cold.
One threat to the balance of terror came in 1970, a new class of Soviet sub nicknamed Yankee by the United States. It was so quiet that American intelligence feared it might roam at will undetected off the U.S. coast. Then along came Captain Chester Whitey Mack.
It was just a tone that went by. I mean, just a blip.
In a minute, you can lose him.
That's right. That's
and
right.
He could be anywhere out there in that big ocean.
And it's a big ocean.
Washington ordered Mack and his sub, the USS Lapon, to follow that blip. That barely audible tone was one of those new Soviet subs armed with 24 long-range ballistic missiles. It was truly a game of blind man's bluff.
There were times that we passed over or under each other because that submarine was so quiet that if we got beyond 3,000 yards, we lost all track of him. We spent 47 days with this guy within a mile.
Whitey's 47-day shadow, in constant danger of a collision, became the stuff of legend among submariners. Mack and his crew received a presidential citation in secret. Their success also proved that the Soviets could run but could not hide. Other American subs, like the USS Tautog, were not quite so successful.
Tautog.
This is Tautog. Moving. I'm turning. He does not hear me.
Сюда.
He sped up.
The USS Tautog was ordered to follow Soviet Captain Boris Bagdasarian, whose sub was considered a threat to U.S. carriers stationed off the coast of Vietnam. Bagdasarian says the Tautog was reckless. Both ships were badly damaged in the collision, and Washington and Moscow had not a clue how the other might react.
The Americans spent several days looking for their submarine in the collision area. The Tautog couldn't signal back because I had smashed its radio antennas. Without its antennas, it was floating like a cigar.
His sub suffered a 12-foot gash 10 feet wide. It seemed an eternity before he regained control. The Americans thought that you had been sunk.
I found that out later.
The Russians let the Americans think the U.S. had sunk a Soviet sub with all hands. The Americans never even acknowledged there'd been a collision. Boris kept a souvenir of the affair, a piece of Tautog, as he continued his career underwater, mostly off the coast of California. Was it like a game between you and the American submarines?
If it was a game, it was a cruel one. It was a game for real men.
Real men, certainly, for their families. This fall, at a church in St. Petersburg, the widows of the K-129 crew joined the families of both sides, Russians and Americans, who came to honor sons, husbands, and fathers lost in the war that never was. The Russians lost several hundred men in accidents, the Americans at least 200. USS Thresher, USS Scorpion, both lost with all hands. And the men who made it home. John Craven now teaches oceanography. Those submarines that were so much a part of his life remain silent sentinels.
Hi, Sue. This is Whitey Mack.
Whitey Mack has traded those years of excitement for life in sales.
Bye-bye.
Boris Bagdasarian suffered radiation exposure from a badly shielded nuclear submarine reactor and is in constant pain. The submarines he devoted his life to have become so much junk, rusting, dying old war horses. All those years of spying and submarines and the billions and billions of dollars, did it serve any purpose at all?
Apart from the decorations, honors and respect, prematurely gray hair, and broken health, nothing else.
The U.S. Navy says it will construct a new submarine base in Washington State for the Trident fleet. 10 submarines still to be built at a cost of $11 billion. That figure to include the Trident missiles, too. The Trident program is being pushed even though we have a strategic arms limitation treaty with the Russians. A new submarine with new missiles to take the place of what we have already, Polaris and Poseidon submarines like the one behind me. Whatever the name, Polaris, Poseidon, or Trident. An SSBN, the Navy's shorthand for Submersible Ship Ballistic Nuclear, is really nothing more than an underwater launching platform for ballistic missiles. Nuclear weapons designed to prevent a nuclear war. The big difference between an SSBN and an old-fashioned ICBM site is that the SSBN can move. And that's what it does, from the freezing waters of the North Pole to the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. Like the legendary Flying Dutchman, a missile submarine is destined to travel the seas without rest, a specter ship, an omen of disaster. For if ever a missile sub fires its weapons in anger, it will signal doomsday. You don't hear much about these submarines. The Navy keeps a very low profile on them for security reasons. But 60 Minutes was allowed to take a short cruise on one recently, the Alexander Hamilton, to get some idea of what they're like. Commander Stan Skorupski, captain of the Hamilton, took her down.
Officer, submerge the ship, make your depth 6'5" feet.
6'5" feet, aye. Chief of the watch on the 1MC, dive.
1MC, dive, aye. Dive. 150 feet.
This is the missile compartment of the USS Alexander Hamilton, SSBN 617. Inside these fat tubes sits more destructive power than has been loosed on Earth since men first started bombing one another. 16 launching tubes, each stuffed with a missile capped by an atomic bomb. 16 of these launching tubes on this single platform, each missile able to push its warhead 1,700 miles. 16 nuclear warheads, each armed with enough destructive power to pulverize a city like Moscow, or Washington, or Leningrad, or New York, or if you will, Peking or Shanghai. For all of them are within range of a missile submarine lurking in the deep recesses of the ocean. Subdued voices, the sailors trained to stay quiet, for submarines are built for silent running. Subdued lighting, too. No brilliant sunrises or sunsets in this nether world. Instead, the blinking lights of computers and the dial lights on hundreds of electronic indicators in the missile control room. We talked with some of the Hamilton's crew. Has it ever occurred to you guys that the entire Soviet Navy is looking for the Alexander Hamilton and its sister ships?
We all know that they're looking for us, but it's something you just have to live with if you're going to ride these things.
Do you ever think about the missiles themselves and the finality of what they stand for?
Oh, yes. You walk by them every day, and you know they're in there. And I think everyone probably has some inner thoughts about it, what they can do and everything.
The business of just being underwater for 60 days at a time, out of touch with the world, that never gets on your nerves?
It gets on your nerves at times. It really does. You know, you're away from everything, your family, and the United States and cities, but you get used to it.
It's a pretty strange experience coming on here the first time. I know myself, the whole first patrol, naturally thought about my family and everything a lot. But the main thing I wanted to see more than anything in the whole world, thing that possessed me most, was seeing a tree, just a, simple tree. I just wanted to see one.
Captain, suppose you woke up one morning fed up with everything, including the Russians, and you wanted to do it once and for all. Could you fire your missiles?
No, I could not myself fire my missiles. It's just impossible. And this is a topic before I came into this program which concerned me, and after 10 years with Polaris submarines, I feel totally assured that no one man can possibly initiate the order to launch missiles.
Well, what is the chain of command for that final order? Where does it start? Through what layers of command does it go before it gets to you?
It's a very direct chain of command. As we know, the only person who can authorize the release of these missiles is the President. And the President, through his National Command Authority, which is the Secretary of Defense and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, would pass the order to release the missiles through only one intermediary, which is Commander-in-Chief Atlantic, who I work for. It works out such that really the missiles belong to the President and the ship belongs to the Commander-in-Chief Atlantic.
Well then, how long does all of that take?
This can happen in a very brief time, in that once the order is given, we will in fact receive it.
Well, you say a brief time. You've had that drill. What I'm thinking of is, when the President gets news, let's say, that missiles are coming our way, how long does it take him to let you know to let your missiles go?
Well, I can't really discuss times, but yes, we do in fact, on a regular basis, try to assure ourselves that we are capable of receiving this order.
With or without orders, Captain Skorupski cannot fire the missiles by himself. The fail-safe system requires that 2 additional officers participate. When you think about what goes on here aboard the Alexander Hamilton and what your mission is, if those 16 missiles ever go, that means that the United States has been attacked.
Yes.
And that may mean that you'll come back to a pulverized, incinerated country, if at all.
There's a possibility of that.
All of us know what we're out here for, and we're all aware of it. There's times when the awareness becomes more acute, like during our battle stations drills. That's when you become really acutely aware of the fact that what you're here for. Day to day, we don't talk about them at all.
It's a pretty terrible thing to think about. Maybe that's the reason we don't talk about it too much.
Do we talk about it? Not really. Do we face the facts? Yes.
The facts include the range of the captain's missiles and how much hiding space in the oceans he has. The longer the range of the missile, the more hiding space. The more sea room in which to prowl, the harder for the Russians to find ships like the Hamilton and destroy them. That is really what's at the heart of the Trident debate. How much hiding space do our SSBNs need? Is 3 million square miles enough? That's what the Poseidon missile gives him. Or does he need 15 million square miles of ocean hiding space? That's what the Trident 1 missile with a range of 4,000 miles would provide. Or does he need 55 million square miles? The sea room offered by the Trident 2 missile with its 6,000-mile range. Is the extra margin of safety worth what it will cost? 60 Minutes put these questions to a brace of Rear Admirals, Robert Yogi Kaufman, a former SSBN skipper who now heads the Navy's Trident program, and Jean Larocque, who resigned his commission as Rear Admiral last spring after 31 years in the Navy. He heads the Center for Defense Information, a research outfit in Washington that keeps a weather eye on military spending. Admiral, why do we need Trident? What's wrong with what we've got now?
Mike, today, there's nothing wrong with what we've got. Today. Today, our Polaris Poseidon submarines roam the oceans relatively invulnerable, or let's say they are invulnerable against today's threat. But with the advancing technology that we see ourselves in the anti-submarine warfare field, and that we feel the Soviets are capable of developing, we can't see that survivability, that invulnerability of our submarine force is guaranteed for the future.
The proposed Trident submarine that the Navy is asking for may be just as vulnerable to any of these new breakthroughs by the Soviets as the current submarine force is.
Then what would you suggest instead, Admiral?
I think that we ought to proceed on the research and development for the Trident 1 missile, which will fit into the existing Poseidon submarines. And that will give us an additional 1,500 miles of range.
That'll get us up to about 4,000, 4,500 miles.
That's right.
And?
Well, that gives you then a greatly increased area for the submarines to operate in, increases it by about 450%.
Question that I'm asking you is it conceivable that the Trident 1 missile, which can go into the current Poseidon submarine, couldn't do the job effectively? If one of the current Poseidon submarines, with the missiles it has available to it, can hit and obliterate 160 Soviet cities?
One surviving submarine today can destroy 160 Soviet cities. That's right. a fair statement, yes. Right. In the absence of any defenses, in the absence of any failure of missiles and so forth. But ignoring those, I mean, the number is still a large number.
One of them can destroy 160 Soviet cities.
That's right.
A fella could be tied up at Charleston, South Carolina and fired into the heartland of the Soviet Union from there.
He could.
Well, then what in the world do you need the Trident submarine for if you have the Trident 1
Because
missile?
by the time we get that missile, and which is also about the time that we can get the submarine, Mike, these submarines that we have today will be approaching the end of their useful life. And we will require a successor to them for several reasons. One, they are noisier than we would like them to be. Two, their equipment is wearing out. They will get to the point where it will cost us more than we can afford to overhaul them, to keep them running. Three, any replacement for these submarines will be expensive, even if even if we went to that same design, a Chinese copy of the Polaris Poseidon-type submarine, it's incumbent upon us to get on with an early introduction of the replacement ship.
And the replacement ship, obviously, you feel, should be the Trident at $1 billion a copy, give or take $300 million.
I certainly do.
For that kind of money, we won't be getting just a new submarine. It'll be a super sub. After 3 years of research and development, the Navy thinks the Trident may turn out to be twice as big as our existing SSBNs. A submarine that will displace more water than Russia's only aircraft carrier, the helicopter-launching Moskva. Why so huge? To provide a launching platform for the proposed Trident II missile, the monster being designed now to throw multiple warheads 6,000 miles. And instead of only 16 launching tubes, there will be perhaps 24 on the Trident. But opponents of Trident question whether the super sub will be able to live up to the promises being made by its advocates. Admiral Hyman Rickover, the man responsible for development of the nuclear submarine, has told the Congress that the Trident will be quieter, even if it is twice as big, and therefore harder for the Russians to track with their anti-submarine devices.
With all respect to Admiral Rickover, no one knows how quiet that submarine will be until we have built it. That's one thing we have learned in the construction of weapons systems. The actual performance is always much better on the drawing board than it ever is when we put it into operation. We won't know if it's quieter until after it's built.
There is nothing really in the design of the Trident submarine which is Cloud 9 type technology. For example, the reactor plant, the propulsion plant that we're going to use in the Trident submarine, in principle, has already been operating. We've been operating a ship at sea with a smaller edition of this propulsion plant. We know what it will do. We know it's quieter.
The Navy is less sure of what the Russians are up to, even though it has film of Russian submarine activity. The Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty limits the number of SSBNs each country can have and the overall number of underwater launching tubes on them. But the Red Navy has 3 times as many subs as we do, though they trail right now on the number of ballistic missile subs. Under the treaty, they can build more, and they are.
We don't know exactly what they're doing. We're always surprised by what we see. Our intelligence lead time often is 0, if it exists at all. So we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what it takes to make them believe that we can have enough weapons to survive their onslaught if they choose to initiate an attack. And I suppose he feels the same way about us.
If we go ahead with the Trident program, we will have still more weapons to attack the Soviet Union, weapons we don't need. The Soviets are certain to follow our lead in development of a Trident submarine. They've followed us in everything else we have developed.
Does it ever, I suppose professionally it would be suicide for you to say that it does, but anyway, has it ever occurred to you that we are all of us, you, the Congress, the taxpayer, captives of a mindless momentum in arming?
I think any of us who think about these things at all seriously wonder when do we stop? What is the logical stopping point? I would love to have someone give me, or give all of us, the finite number by means of which both sides, whoever the adversaries are, would consider that they have adequate deterrence.
What is the logical stopping point? How much is enough? When do we cross the threshold from security to overkill? Although the Vietnam War is over for the United States, the Pentagon, with the approval of the White House, is asking for more money for defense spending next year, including another $1 billion for the Trident project with its new submarine and tailor-made missiles. The administration says the Trident weapon system will give us more muscle at the SALT negotiations. Critics say that the deterrent power of our land-based ICBMs, plus our strategic bombers, plus these Polaris Poseidon submarines give the U.S. plenty of muscle. That this instrument of steel and electronic circuitry and fissionable atoms and men is enough.
One of the key questions of this presidential campaign is who has the health and temperament to become the next commander-in-chief and assume the unthinkable power to use nuclear weapons. The Cold War as we knew it may be over, but both the U.S. and Russia still keep enough nuclear weapons on alert to end civilization. And now a new Cold War is brewing, with both sides developing more sophisticated and more accurate weapons. Tonight, we're going to show you what this new Cold War looks like from inside the U.S. Strategic Command. STRATCOM, as it's called, trains every day for the possibility of nuclear war and takes extraordinary measures to make sure one person and one person only, the President of the United States, can give the order to launch a nuclear weapon.
130, 120, 110, 100 feet, 84.
The USS Kentucky rising to the surface off the coast of Hawaii. Nearly 2 football fields long, it is the deadliest engine of destruction in the American arsenal. Able to carry almost 200 nuclear warheads atop the missiles loaded beneath those hatches. Commander Brian Freck is the captain.
The warheads that can be carried on my missiles are extremely powerful.
And compare them to the bomb that leveled Hiroshima.
Much more powerful than that. Much more powerful than Hiroshima.
Up to 30 times more powerful. And on any given day, a number of these submarines are hiding somewhere in the world's oceans, ready to respond to a launch order from the president.
When you're out here, are other countries looking for you?
I always operate on that assumption that someone is looking for me.
Has anybody ever found you?
No. Not even close.
You sure?
Yes, I am.
60 Minutes found the Kentucky, but only because we had arranged a rendezvous to go aboard.
If this boat were a country, you'd be a nuclear power.
That's true, yes, sir.
Does that ever give you pause to have all that power under your command?
It's a lot of responsibility, but with that responsibility comes a lot of training and practice.
Die! All been cycled, all been shut.
Operating at a depth of 160 feet, the Kentucky's crew practiced the procedures needed to launch its missiles.
Second condition, 1SQ for training. This is the captain. This is an exercise.
Second condition, 1SQ for training, Con Weapons Act. Spin up all missiles. Chief of the Watch, sound the general alarm. Sound the general alarm, aye, sir. I have permission to fire, Con Weapons Act.
Before that trigger can be squeezed, multiple keys, including one that unlocks the missile tubes, which take up approximately 1/3 of the ship, have to be brought out from different safes.
No one person can make a launch happen. So I have keys in my possession. Other members of the crew have keys in their possession.
One key is carried to the captain by 2 sailors, who both must hold it.
Captain, the launch is authorized.
And here's the thing you need to know about the safe where that key is kept.
No one on board has the combination. We get that combination with the launch order. That is my way of knowing that the president has ordered the launch, is when the combination he gives me opens that safe.
The president literally gives you the combination to the safe that the key is in.
Yes. You have permission to fire.
2 weapons, you have permission to fire, aye, sir. Weapons, Con, you have permission to fire.
The Kentucky and other nuclear missile submarines, along with intercontinental ballistic missiles and nuclear bombers,
Attention on deck.
are under the command of Admiral Cecil Haney.
Your nuclear forces are capable of executing all assigned missions.
Head of the U.S. Strategic Command, Haney is the most powerful military officer you've never heard of. In command not just of the nation's nuclear forces, but its space satellites and cyber weapons as well.
There are no significant solar activity causing impacts to satellite operations or communications.
His morning briefing at Strategic Command headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska is classified above top secret.
Thank you. Appreciate the update.
That clock-marked POTUS, short for President of the United States, tells Haney what time zone President Obama is in case he has to reach the Commander-in-Chief in a hurry.
So who in the United States government has the authority to order the use of nuclear weapons?
Only the President of the United States has that authority.
Does Congress have to approve?
No, Congress does not have to approve.
So these really are the President's own weapons?
It's our nation's weapons with the President's authority, yes.
Attention on deck.
Haney took us to his Global Operations Center, a top-secret facility 3 stories underground.
If a missile were launched against the United States, the warning would be received here, and that clock would start ticking down. Colonel Barbara Buells was the watch commander.
I see this sign up here, red impact,
Yes,
blue
sir.
impact time. So red impact would be an enemy missile,
That is correct.
and you would have a time.
We would have a time to impact. And blue impact would be any U.S. counterattack.
Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Geelan would pull out the options for a retaliatory nuclear strike.
My responsibility as the STRATCOM Nuclear Strike Advisor is to be the expert on Nuclear Decision Handbook and the alert status of all U.S. nuclear forces.
The Nuclear Decision Handbook.
Yeah, also known as the Black Book.
Black Book. So is there a copy of the Black Book down here?
There is. It's in the safe down here, sir.
An identical copy of the Black Book is in that briefcase which follows the president wherever he goes.
So he's never away from the options.
That's correct.
And would they tell him what kinds of weapons you would use, what targets you would hit?
They would be that specific, yes.
Would they give him an estimate of casualties?
Yeah, we would have to give the president answers to a lot of different questions. That's one that I would expect to get.
Admiral Haney would go to a room called the battle deck where he would talk directly to the president.
And is this the phone you would use?
This is one of the phones I might use, yes.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of Defense. I don't see the man who
You're
controls...
looking for the president.
I am.
I can speak to the president directly from this microphone.
And in a crisis, how long does it take to get the president on the line?
Not very long.
If Russia launched a missile from a submarine off the coast of the United States, it would take only minutes to reach its target.
So how long, in fact, does the president have to make a decision?
He has minutes, 7, 8, 9 minutes, depending on details, but less than 10 minutes.
Former Secretary of Defense William Perry was a key architect of nuclear weapons during the Cold War with the Soviet Union.
If the weapons can be launched within minutes, does that mean we're still in the same old hair trigger standoff that we were during the Cold War?
That's right. And we still have launch on warning, the same policy we had then. We still have the same hair trigger response.
So what's changed since the Cold War if we're still on this hair trigger alert?
Fundamentally, nothing has changed.
But the numbers of weapons are much lower now than during the Cold War.
The number of weapons are sufficient to destroy, obliterate all of civilization.
Still?
Still. It doesn't take that many. We still have more than 1,000 nuclear weapons on alert, ready to go. It doesn't take 1,000 to destroy civilization.
At the end of the Cold War, both sides pledged to point their missiles at the open ocean. But it would take just minutes to change back to real targets. That provides a small hedge against an accidental war triggered by a false alarm of the kind Perry experienced in 1979 when a watch officer mistakenly inserted a training tape into a computer.
So it looked like 200 ICBMs were on the way from the Soviet Union to the United States. Happily, we got that situation figured out before we had to go to the president. But had we not, he would have received a call at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "Sir, you have 7 or 8 minutes to decide whether to launch this before these missiles land on our ICBM silos."
And what was the fail-safe there? What stopped it from going to the president?
What stopped it was an astute general who sensed something was wrong.
If you've had one serious case in 45 years, that would seem like a pretty good record.
Yeah, it only takes one. It only takes one.
Strategic Command is building a new $1.2 billion headquarters, but it won't be any more able to survive a nuclear blast than the underground command center in the current headquarters. That clock counting down the time to missile impact would also tell Admiral Haney how long he had to get out of there alive.
Safe escape time that you see indicated is the time left remaining for Admiral Haney, as the commander of U.S. STRATCOM, to exit the battle deck, to be able to make it to his commander support aircraft, to be able to board that aircraft and continue to provide his advice to the President of the United States as his senior nuclear advisor.
On the tarmac at STRATCOM, air crews drill to take off from this airborne command post fast enough to escape incoming nuclear weapons. If Admiral Haney's headquarters were destroyed and he didn't make it out in time,
the President is talking to his...
It would be up to Rear Admiral Andy Lennon to assume command and make sure the President and only the President could still give the order to launch nuclear weapons.
We're in voice communications with the President.
Talking to the President personally?
Yes, sir. So that way we are ensuring that we're getting the President's intent.
How do you know it's the President?
We have some very complex and secure procedures to authenticate the President and to be sure that we're really talking to the President of the United States.
So he can't just tell you, this is the President speaking?
He can, but we will authenticate to verify that it is the President speaking.
Once the President has given you that order, what do?
Then we would communicate that order to our strategic forces, our intercontinental ballistic missiles, our bombers, or our submarines.
Chief of Wallace, sound the general alarm.
Sound the general alarm, aye, sir.
The order would be received on board the Kentucky, and the crew would go through launch procedures they have practiced hundreds of times before. Last year, the Kentucky actually fired an unarmed missile in a test flight which lit up the California sky and caused a brief UFO scare. Had it carried a real warhead,
This is our meteorological effects officer.
Stuart Miller, a young Air Force captain aboard the airborne command post, would begin charting the unthinkable.
My main role is gathering information on nuclear detonations worldwide and then applying meteorological data to them, specifically winds, to figure out if there's fallout, depending on the attributes of the detonation, where the fallout's going, how many people might be affected, who might be affected, things of that nature.
So you basically come up with a casualty estimate of?
Essentially, yes. That's one of the things that I can provide.
You must have looked at some pretty depressing scenarios.
We kind of do, yeah. Yes.
Have you ever had the conversation with yourself, well, what if the President issued an order to use nuclear weapons and I didn't agree with it? Would I carry out that order?
The President expects me as his combatant commander to provide him the best military advice I have. So he would expect me to voice my opinion.
You would have a voice, but if you disagreed with the decision?
I'm a military man, and we follow the orders of our commander-in-chief.
NATO, which just marked its 70th anniversary, is widely considered the gold standard of military alliances, binding countries on both sides of the Atlantic in common cause against Russian aggression. But President Trump complains that other members of the alliance don't pay their fair share of what it costs to defend Europe against the intimidation tactics of Vladimir Putin. The president has told aides he doesn't see the point of the alliance and has even mentioned withdrawing from NATO. Despite those misgivings, the U.S. and its NATO allies have been steadily increasing the frequency and size of their military exercises. Last fall, NATO held the largest one yet in Norway, one of the countries President Trump has singled out for failing to spend enough on defense. You might not think of Norway, which has a tiny military, as a vital NATO ally. But we found a country that is on the front lines with Russia and serves as NATO's eyes and ears in the high north.
Norway's F-16s are on 15-minute alert 24/7. Every time Russian military aircraft are detected, these pilots scramble to intercept them. Videos they bring back show nuclear-capable Russian bombers as they fly up and down the Norwegian coast. Most of the encounters are routine. But sometimes, says Lieutenant General Rune Jacobsen, Norway's Joint Force commander, they're anything but.
What we have seen lately is aggressive flying and simulated attacks against Norwegian exercises.
Simulated attacks?
Yeah.
How do you know it's a simulated attack?
An airman knows what an attack looks like.
So they go to the point at which they would release their weapons?
Exactly.
Jakobsen tracked those simulated attacks from his command center buried deep inside a mountain. After the Cold War ended, a nuclear-proof bunker seemed positively old-fashioned, until lately when Russia became more threatening.
This is an illustration of a Russian attack formation, simulated attack, that was flown in May 2017, not far north of this position.
And the red dot is the target?
The red dot is the target.
That doesn't look like the act of a friendly country.
No, that's not something you should do to your neighbor.
Norway shares a 120-mile border with its neighbor Russia. It is some of the most remote, rugged, and beautiful landscape in all of Europe. Captain Karina Vinterdahl guards the northern sector with 120 soldiers.
They are along the border all the time, 24/7. I have people along the border. So I have 4 observation posts that are manned at all time throughout the whole year.
Are your soldiers armed?
Yeah.
Do they ever have to use their weapons?
No, but we have to be prepared.
We went to the most remote of those outposts in the high north of the Norwegian mainland. One unit was just finishing its 3 weeks on watch and a new one coming in. To get there, you have to lug your gear up a long, steep staircase, part of which is covered over to defend against the Arctic winter. The observation post is manned year-round, and once you get to the top, you can see why it's worth the trouble. These Norwegian soldiers are able to look deep into Russia and far out to sea, making this a key piece of terrain for the NATO alliance.
That's Russia over there, and this is where the border with Norway ends. It's NATO's northernmost flank, and you don't need to be a military expert to know you can never leave your flank exposed. That includes the Barents Sea out there. Those are the home operating waters of Russia's northern fleet and are kept under constant surveillance by the U.S. and Norway.
This map shows what lies just over the horizon on that thumb of land called the Kola Peninsula. It is the home of Russia's northern fleet, naval bases, airfields, and nuclear weapons storage sites, which represent that country's single greatest concentration of military power, especially submarines.
They have a very capable submarine force, and we've seen an increase in submarine activity over the last few years that causes me pause.
Admiral James Fogo, the commander of U.S. naval forces in Europe, is particularly concerned about this submarine, the Severodvinsk, nuclear-powered and armed with land attack cruise missiles with a range greater than 1,000 miles.
The Severodvinsk is a brand new class of submarine, and it's very capable, it's very quiet. So that's the most important thing, I think, in submarine warfare.
When you say quiet, you're saying harder to detect, harder to track.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Does that sub come down into the Atlantic?
Suffice it to say that the Russians have increased their presence in all bodies of water around Europe and in the Atlantic.
Have you ever lost the Severodvinsk?
I'd rather not comment on submarine operations to that specific level of detail.
Fogo won't comment, but Pentagon officials told 60 Minutes that last summer the Severodvinsk slipped into the Atlantic Ocean and for weeks evaded all attempts to find it. In peacetime, losing a Russian sub in the Atlantic is embarrassing. In a crisis, it could be a disaster.
Think about the global infrastructure that rests on the bottom of the ocean.
You're talking about the undersea cables.
That's correct.
Those fiber optic cables carry 99.4% of the data exchanged over the internet by the U.S. and its allies and trading partners. Depending on your point of view, they are either the backbone or the Achilles heel of the world economy.
Have Russian submarines gotten close to those undersea cables?
I'm not at liberty to talk about any of that.
That's because tracking Russian submarines is a top-secret, day-in, day-out game of hide and seek. But the Norwegian military allowed 60 Minutes aboard one of its maritime patrol planes to see what sub-hunting looks like. The pilot, co-pilot, and engineer are up front, while the crew in the back scans the Norwegian sea with radar and high-powered cameras. Flying at less than 300 feet, they can clearly make out anything on the surface, including passing cargo ships. For what's under the water, they drop patterns of sonobuoys which send out sound waves that will bounce off a submerged submarine. Major Leif Outerholm, the plane's tactical coordinator, has been flying these missions since the 1980s.
And it is very important to collect on remote locations.
How big an area is it that you have to cover?
The area operation for this kind of aircraft is 6 times larger than the area of land in Norway, so it's quite big.
So how frequently do you encounter the Russians out here?
We counter them regularly when we go further east.
Further east lies the headquarters of the Northern Fleet, and Norwegian patrol planes frequently spot Russian submarines while they're still on the surface. But the most valuable intelligence is collected by a ship, one you've never heard of. There it is, down there in the harbor, the crown jewel of Norway's fleet.
That's Norway's newest spy ship, the Marjata. It's at sea nearly 300 days a year monitoring the Northern Fleet, but just happened to be in port the day we arrived here in Kirkenes, the town closest to the Russian border. The Marjata flies the Norwegian flag, but much of its eavesdropping equipment comes from the U.S.
Its mission is to collect intelligence on the operations of Russia's Northern Fleet, which Lieutenant General Jakobsen says is arming itself with a new generation of precision-guided weapons and testing them in the waters off Norway.
Are you able to monitor those?
Yeah, because most of the testing of new equipment is done up north of the Kola Peninsula, and we are present there every day with our maritime patrol aircrafts and our vessels at sea.
That daily haul of intelligence, all of which is directly relayed to the U.S. and NATO, didn't stop President Trump from sending this letter of complaint. Norway, he wrote, is the only NATO ally sharing a border with Russia that lacks a credible plan to spend 2% of its gross domestic product on defense.
Well, I think that he has a fair point in pointing out that we need to step up.
Ina Eriksen Søreide is Norway's foreign minister, the first woman to hold the job.
So these are all your predecessors?
They are. And they're all men.
And they're all men. You're the first woman.
Yeah.
Before that, she was defense minister. In 2014, when all the members of NATO pledged to increase their military spending to 2% of their GDP.
So have you met that pledge?
No, we haven't met it yet, but we are moving in the right direction, and we are doing a lot of big investments.
The biggest of those investments is the American-made F-35, a stealth fighter designed to evade state-of-the-art air defenses.
It will dramatically increase operational capabilities, both in the high north and beyond.
Norway is buying 52 of them at a cost of $89 million each.
It's a very expensive airplane.
Well, and it also functions well, and it has capabilities that we need. Our F-16 has served us well, but they are starting to get old.
Those F-16s are going on 40 years old and were never designed to be stealthy. Until they are replaced by the F-35, Lieutenant General Jakobsen told us, Norway's Air Force will be no match for Russia's modern air defenses.
Meaning, today, if we had a conflict, we would not be able to fly in the northernmost part of Norway.
So your Air Force today couldn't operate in the very high north?
No, not in a serious crisis.
Last fall, NATO practiced what it would do in a serious crisis, bringing in 50,000 troops, 250 aircraft, and 65 ships, all under the command of Admiral Foggo.
This is one of the largest NATO exercises since the Cold War.
Called Trident Juncture, it was a war game designed to repulse an invasion of Norway by an unnamed country, whose identity was a mystery to no one.
And the message to Russia is?
The message to Russia or anybody else that may want to challenge the alliance is think twice. You don't want to mess with us.
It was the first time in nearly 30 years the U.S. had sent a carrier strike group, the USS Harry S. Truman and its escorts, above the Arctic Circle, a long way from the Persian Gulf and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Did you feel that NATO just
wasn't paying attention to Norway?
What we saw was that NATO over many years had been engaged heavily, for instance, in Afghanistan, and that's a very important mission. But we also saw that some of the, I would say, core areas of NATO, the territorial defense, maybe had not had the same attention over years.
Well, now you have an American aircraft carrier operating off your coast.
I think it is a very good way of showing that we have to practice in peacetime to be able to operate if the crisis occurs.
Norway will never have a military that can take on its much larger and more powerful neighbor. But the pilots who fly these F-16s call themselves the Guardians of the North. They can't stop the Russians, but they are the first to spot them.
The sea ice over the Arctic is melting and shrinking so fast, we will see in our lifetime something that hasn't happened, it's believed, since the end of the last ice age, the opening of an ocean, the Arctic Ocean. And with that, access to trade routes and trillions of dollars worth of oil and natural gas, almost as much as the entire U.S. economy. But this isn't a story about climate change. This is a story about the competition for those riches. The Russians, for instance, have already amassed a major military presence in the region. It's also about pioneers, U.S. scientists and naval personnel learning to tough it out in the harshness of this still ice-covered frontier. We discovered just how harsh on a recent trip to the Arctic. The Arctic Ocean sits on top of the globe, encircled by Russia, which encompasses about half of its coastline, Norway, Greenland, Canada, and the United States, thanks to Alaska. We flew as guests of the Navy from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, 200 miles in the direction of the North Pole, over fractured, thinning ice, to a spot where the ice was still thick enough to support this base camp. It was a small, temporary village, disrupting the peace and purity of the ice, white as far as the eye can see. The camp was built for a scientific and military exercise called ICEX 2016. Hi, everyone. How do you do? Nice to meet you.
Welcome, welcome.
For 5 weeks, this no-man's land of ice was home to an expeditionary team of sailors, scientists, and engineers whose mission was to understand how to survive in maybe the most hostile conditions on Earth. The Navy says those taking part in this exercise are the first humans ever to set foot on this part of the planet. It's actually beautiful beyond belief, isn't it?
It really is.
Chuck McGuire was one of the first to arrive. He's an engineer with the University of Washington's Applied Physics Lab that was brought in to build this camp from scratch.
So you get off the plane, there's nothing. There's no shelter, there's no indoors.
No.
There was just ice.
Ice everywhere. That's right.
And you say, how am I going to survive?
You pick up a hammer and start building.
They built a makeshift city called Sargo for roughly 60 people, consisting of a command post, tight living quarters, a mess hall stocked with food airlifted in weekly, and some very primitive toilet facilities.
That outhouse is really cold.
Outhouse is awful. Oh my God. So what about water? You can't just eat the ice, right?
You can if you know what you're looking for.
This ice mining team knows what to look for: old sea ice that's been baking in the sun long enough that the salt has leached out.
Ice mining team, we are returning back to camp.
They bring back chunks to melt down into the camp's only drinking water.
All the things that you take for granted in normal civilization, right? Shelter, food, the ease of going to the bathroom, right? That is all different out here.
What qualities do you think it takes to stay here and survive out here for weeks?
I think maybe you have to be a little off initially and really understand that everything outside that door is trying to kill you here.
If the ice and wind don't get you, polar bears might. An armed sentry patrols the perimeter of the camp in case one comes looking for food.
All right, good evening, everyone. Another successful day here at Sargo.
There's a daily briefing in the command post to coordinate the various researchers who are studying and trying to understand this part of the world as they plan for a more sustained presence here. They're analyzing, among other things,
the ice flow's moved about 9 miles to the west-northwest today.
How climate change is affecting the way the ice here drifts and migrates.
It feels like you're on land. You get the sense that you're on land. It's very firm and, the plane could land. But we're moving, which is kind of astonishing.
I think every day it's interesting to wake up and recognize you're 8 or 9 miles from where you were the day before. Looks the same, but it's pretty interesting to figure that out.
The ice moves that much every day in unpredictable directions because of the currents underwater and the wind above.
Down here, we're 23 degrees Celsius.
Also unpredictable is the weather. We met a team of meteorologists using balloons to help with forecasting, which is key for any military operation.
So these balloons measure your temperature, your dew point, the wind speed.
Commander Scott Parker, a meteorologist with the Navy's Atlantic Submarine Force, says there's virtually no weather data collected up here. In other parts of the world, meteorologists rely on satellites for forecasting. But up here near the North Pole, satellite coverage is minimal.
How cold does it get up here? Because it's right now, I don't know.
It's
People
freezing,
can see
right?
It's
the lowest we've had is 26 below Fahrenheit. And today's actually our warmest day.
Come on.
And right now is 6 below.
And with this wind chill factor, because the wind is really blowing.
It is terrible. It's about 25 below zero with a wind chill.
And you telling me this is the warmest day you've had?
This is the warmest day we've had so far.
Do you want to go inside?
I do. Let's go.
The temperature can drop to as low as 50 below, and that can wreak havoc on just about everything. Weapons, communication systems, sensors, and people, including these Navy divers who were here to test their latest cold weather gear and their endurance in the frigid water. These robotics engineers are conducting underwater experiments in a temperature-controlled tent. When we were there, Doug Horner and his team were field testing these underwater drones for the first time in the Arctic.
When we first put it in, we checked the ballast.
The drones are collecting scientific data about the Arctic, where the water gets warmer the deeper you go. They're also getting a picture of what it looks like down below.
My primary emphasis here is the ability to map the under ice. So we have sensors, sonar specifically, which is sound, which is focused upwards. And what we hope to do with continually putting sound upwards is to make a map.
You're mapping the bottom of the ice?
Yes, the underneath portion of the ice.
And why is that important?
I want to be able to navigate relative to that. So this is the idea of being able to navigate an underwater robot accurately without GPS. Because in the ice, you don't have the opportunity to come up to the surface for a GPS fix.
He says these drones could also be used to patrol the waters of the Arctic looking for enemy subs, for instance, the way drones hover in the sky over a battlefield. The Navy is testing this technology and amassing all of this research to prepare for an expanded presence in the Arctic as the ice continues to melt. The Russians are already there in force. Last year, they staged a military exercise in the Arctic as seen in this Russian Ministry of Defense footage. It involved about 40,000 troops, 15 submarines, 41 warships, and multiple aircraft. No one disputes their right to do that on their own territory. It's just that it wasn't announced.
We pre-announce ours. No one is surprised by them. Whereas the exercise that Russia did was a snap exercise, which is a bit destabilizing.
Until May of this year, retired four-star General Philip Breedlove was the supreme Allied commander of NATO with responsibility for the Arctic. What else is destabilizing, he says, is Russia's military buildup along something called the Northern Sea Route skirting the Russian Arctic coastline. The route could become an alternative to the Suez Canal, saving huge amounts of time and money for the commercial shipping industry.
I have heard as much as 28 days decrease in some of the transit from the northern European markets to the Asian markets. That is an incredible economic opportunity, and it could be a very big boon to business around the world.
What would it mean if the Russians did gain control over the Northern Sea Route?
If the Russians had the ability to militarily hold that at ransom, that is a big lever over the world economy.
So tell us in a nutshell what's happening.
Along that route, what we see is Russia upgrading over 50 airfields and ports, 14 of them to be done this year, increasing the number of ground troops, putting in surface-to-air missiles, putting in sensors that could be used to guide weapons, that could be used to deny access.
In 2007, Russia went so far as to plant its flag on the seafloor under the North Pole.
I think it's important to understand what the Deputy Prime Minister said, that the Arctic is a part of Russia, that they will provide the defense for the Arctic, and that they will make money in the Arctic, and that the Western world may therefore bring sanctions on them, but that's okay, because tanks don't need visas. I think it sends a pretty clear message.
The U.S. has not tried to match the Russian buildup. The Navy relying on its fleet of nuclear and attack submarines, the most powerful in the world. When we were there, the Navy was conducting a submarine warfare exercise, something it does in the Arctic every 2 years. When a sub surfaces in the Arctic, they use shovels to carve a visual landmark in the ice that the sub can see. X literally marks the spot. But that X is a moving target because of the drifting ice.
There we go.
Which makes maneuvering a windowless steel cylinder the size of a football field to such a pinpoint location seem impossible. But on this day, the skipper and his crew, punching up through thick ice, nailed it on their first try. It took a few minutes for the sail, the shark fin on top, to completely emerge.
There they are.
When they popped the hatch, a special guest climbed out, the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, who'd been on board for 5 days, taking part in the naval exercise.
What does it mean that the Secretary of the Navy has come up to the Arctic? Is there a special significance to you being here?
Our responsibilities are increasing as the Arctic ice melts, as the climate changes, and so the Navy has got to be here. We've got to provide that presence, and I hope that my presence emphasizes what we do.
As he flew off to Alaska, we climbed down the ladder into the fast-attack, nuclear-powered USS Hampton and went through a 100-degree change in temperature, from 25 below to about 75.
Do you feel claustrophobic?
Oh, no, not at all.
No.
You get used to it.
Commander of the Hampton, Theron Davis, took us to the control room as the crew prepared to submerge.
Very well. Stationary dive the ship.
Stationary dive the ship, aye, sir. Dive, stationary dive the ship. Make your depth 150 feet.
What he and his crew of 20-somethings are practicing is something subs only do in the Arctic. Diving down through new ice that had formed around the sub.
What is that?
That's the ice breaking away. It's the first time we surfaced through this thick ice and stayed up here this long. So that's the ice that's beside us. And as we go down, it's got to crack away from the hull.
We're listing. I'm tilting this way.
Cycle aft fence.
Cycle aft fence, aye, sir. 5 on deck. 5 on aye.
Now we're starting to see water. See the water on the monitor? That's only water.
Once they get to a cruising level, they practice hide and seek with another sub. In some of the exercises, they also test fire blank torpedoes.
So I'm going to show you a torpedo tube.
One of their challenges is ice keels, huge chunks of ice that jut down from the surface and confuse sonar-guided torpedoes that can't distinguish them from enemy submarines.
So what we're working on is saying, hey, how can we fix that? How do we know we're going to, we can go and shoot a weapon in the ice and get a hit? Right, so now we have to go up there and we have to figure that out.
We return to the surface.
We're coming up right now. We're 122 feet.
one American sub in a region with a growing Russian military presence. During our last day at the camp, something dramatic happened. A crack in the ice along the perimeter became a giant lake. New fissures formed right through the heart of the camp, up to the doorstep of the command post. Everything was packed up quickly for an emergency evacuation, a reminder that the most formidable adversary here may not be Russian forces, but the forces of nature.
You'd think, wouldn't you, that Andy Rooney has been everywhere and done everything. Well, not quite.
It was not long ago when there were just 3 things I'd never done in my life. Tonight, as I sit before you, there are only 2. I have now been down in a nuclear attack submarine.
Andy Rooney.
I boarded the Miami in Groton, Connecticut. Stood on a deck they called a sail while we left the harbor, under the bridge. All I knew about submarines was from old movies, and I was surprised how much it was really like them. When we submerged, they actually shouted, "Dive, dive."
Dive, dive.
Yes, sir.
I thought that was only in Hollywood. And they really did look through a periscope. They called it dancing with the one-eyed lady. I was never more impressed with young Americans than I was watching the men, boys, many of them, with no more than a high school education, run one of the most complicated machines ever designed.
Bridgetown, steady course 174.
A nuclear submarine. The Miami is 362 feet long, stuffed full of machinery and electronics. It's an incredible package, and every inch counts. There are so many things that have to be done to keep humans alive underwater. All I could think of down there was getting hit by a depth charge and being trapped inside to drown. The crew seemed immune to that thought.
No, not at all. Not anymore. When I first joined, I thought about it, but I don't even think about it anymore.
Because it has nuclear power, the boat, they call it a boat, can stay out for as long as the food lasts. Food is entertainment on board. The guys eat 4 meals a day.
If it's food like this, it's lunch, and if it's leftovers and stuff, it's midnight. And if it's 6, and you get, broccoli and mashed potatoes.
So you really don't need to watch, you just go by
it. Whatever they feed you when you get up.
They share one cramped toilet and shower facility. His bunk is all the privacy a sailor has. The sailor in the top bunk has the toughest time going to bed.
Oh, yeah.
Unlucky submariners sleep beneath 10 tons of torpedo. Each torpedo costs $1 million. The submarine's a weapon of war, and no one forgets it.
They're a combination of torpedoes and cruise missiles, plus we have 12 vertical tubes for cruise missiles out front.
Chief of the watch, emergency blow all main ballast tanks.
Emergency blow all main ballast tanks, aye.
Helm rudder.
The best part of the trip was coming up. Just the opposite of landing in an airplane, and twice as exhilarating. Makes you happy and a little surprised to be alive and breathing again. If you think the younger generation in our country has gone to hell, you haven't been down with a submarine crew. It brought back all the good memories I have of why we won World War II.